guys, welcome back to my channels. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to draw a symmetrical building facade with odd numbers of windows. And I'm sure many of you have noticed many of the symmetrical buildings, typically the traditional building or classical building, if you like to say. There are symmetrical facade, but most of them has odd numbers of opening, and some of them 3, 5, 7, and you name it. You will see a lot of them in Europe, London, any city, particularly in European countries. They're beautiful, the beauty are eternal, but when it comes to drawings, it's easy to say, it's easy to draw because there are repetitions of window. But when it comes to perspective drawing, I do find it quite tricky when it comes to divide them to odd numbers, because it's easy to have something only when it's symmetrical, only two windows, you can just add on 2 double. But when it comes to odd numbers, it's quite difficult to divide them to 3, 5, 7 to visually look equal in perspective. But in this video, I'm going to show you the super tricks how to do it. Let's have a look, and I hope you enjoy it. Please watch the window. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming back to my channels. In this video we're going to do some drawing exercise tricks. I'm going to draw a symmetrical building facade with odd numbers of opening, and how to do the tricks, how to divide them into 3 windows opening that would look visually equal in perspective drawings. And I'm going to use a sketch drawing to divide them into 3 odd numbers of opening. Of course, I started with this cube to start the perspective form without the vanishing points. Most the symmetrical traditional building looks harmonious, look beautiful, but most of them has odd opening windows. And I started with find a center point just like this, diagonal on each side. From that, then I create another diagonal line from the end bottom to the top middle. This give me the determine one section into 3 facade of this window, just like this. You see, by creating this, I can then create visually looks equal in numbers, in terms of size. From that, I'm going to find another center line to determine where the opening is for each section, from each facade. The center point, this will be the starting point of my the opening in the center, just like that. The same, repeat the same techniques. The line, the vertical line, align with the existing line that I did. This one is just a reference, put the dot on the top so I would not be confused, as there will be so many different lines, indication of the wall, each one. Now I'm going to find that center line again, because this would be the line for my frame, window frames, the opening to the wall, and the same to that, just like this. See, when the line cross together, that will be the line, like that. Now I found my windows opening, repeat the same in the middle, and of course to the end the same process. At this stage, it is important to have a really thin, fine line, because there are so many lines overlapping each other. So it is important to make sure they're still clear, could still be visible. Now, again, back to find the central line that will show visually the vanishing point, visually for the perspective appearance of these buildings. At the same time, it determines the bricks, the material of this building property. And of course going to mark the flooring line. In this one, the opening will be, I like to use the arch. You see the line that I cross, it will determine where the height of this each opening as a reference to another. It is important to have these lines as a reference of each line for each one. So the purpose is using line within the building, so without using the vanishing points, because the line is already there as a reference. Just like this. At this stage, to add as much information as possible to start with. They all will be the same, but on the ground floor the windows is higher than the one on the fourth floor. Just like this. In the center of the opening. This one I'm going to make it slightly higher because it will be accessible to the balcony. I'm going to add that slightly longer. Now I'm going to add more lines. In the center again, just like this. Then add more line on the arches to indicate the frames. And this is going to be like a stone frames, stone structure rather. Now on the rustication, this is how you should draw it. This is how I draw it. Find a center line. Assume there's a center line in the circle shape within the arch, so it's pointing each of the stone pointing toward the center. That's how I determine to be visually realistic how these stone or bricks are laid on the wall. Like that. It's pointing toward the center of the arch. That's how the pattern are laid on the building wall. And of course, is a rustication. There's a much bigger gap as opposed to brick wall. So I indicate that line, much thicker line, to make it look visually realistic. Just like this. To accentuate the rustication on the facade. Or connect it to the arches there. So there will be a bit of gap there. Under there, that will be the end of the top end of the first floor. But in this one, I'm going to accentuate by adding cornice. More kind of a typical traditional building. It has these ornamental features at the front. This will be cornice just to accentuate the first floor and the ground floor and the first floor. Doesn't have to be, in this case I am not drawing into detail of that cornice, more of a profile drawing of it to indicate how it should look or where it is usually. Now, of course, I'm drawing adding the inward to indicate the thickness of this arch wall opening, to show the thickness of this building wall, just like this. And this one is quite simple. Just draw my line parallel with the reference line, and also the follow the size of that arch outside of the arch. The inside and outside look slightly, make it slightly the same shape, just like that. And how I point at the line to inside is just roughly toward the center of that the back of the lines as the reference of the vanishing point. In this one, I'm going to add a bit of this tone to be slightly wider, as suggest as the indication of pedestal where this arch is resting. Again, pointing at that, the continuation of the rustication inward, just like this, continuation of that inward. Find the center line, center point, again, because it's the same thing. And in this one, on the first floor, the rustication only appears on the corner of the building structure. So I'm drawing it like this to indicate that rustication, but the rest will be just bricks, like most of the typical of the traditional buildings, just like this. This is to indicate the thickness, the gap between that stone rustication. Now then, I add more of this line just to reference of the brick wall on the first floor. So the line will be much smaller, just like this. So leaving that rustication on the corner, just like that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a bit of detail on the roofing as well, the eave, which is also the cornice. I would say the cornice, just much wider from the bottom, which is quite similar to the one on above the ground floor, to the indication of the first floor and the ground floor. But in this one will be repeated on the eave, on the roof, to the end of the top of the first floor, but it's usually much wider. But again, it's not much detail on it, it's just a profiling line, more of a profile reference, because in reality, when building is actually constructed and built on the site, the detail of the ornamental detail will be different to what actually drawn. Now I'm going to add the detail on that window framing. Usually it's overhang at the bottom of the window, maybe about 50 mils or 100 mils, so that the water it's not, the water will be drop, not leaking into the inside the building. And of course, at the top first floor, I need to indicate the shade of that to show the thickness, the overhang of that frame. Right, now this one on this window in the center is I'm going to add a balcony banister, more kind of safety banister. So the door opening, there will be a door openings. It is in the building standard in the United Kingdom is required to add a safety balcony there. You see, this is the symmetrical building, but most of the symmetrical building, although the definition of symmetrical is identical to each other, but most of the windows, but all of the symmetrical building has odd numbers of windows. But to draw them is quite tricky if you don't know how to divide them equally in these three numbers, because it's easy to have two numbers, just find a center point and that was it. But most of the symmetrical building has odd numbers of windows, the 3, 5, 7, 9 and so on. But we're having these tricks with the sketch drawing, how to divide them into three is pretty easy. So now the next process is hatching, to show where the shadow is, where the sunlight coming from. Now I'm shading a bit of that on the windows, the balcony, and shadow indicate that on the window framing and the cornices. And the cornices, the features I have not put hatching on it, just put outline on top of it in it, more of a double lines, just like that. When it comes to very small drawing like this, it's quite tricky. Too much detail also is not good, because it could distort the appearance of the buildings, because it is important to have a very fine lines. Of course, the next process I'm going to repeat what done on the other side on this side, but it's just the opening, the blank wall, just a no opening. But of course I will continue that detail of the rustication on the corner on the first floor. Starting with the first one line, do exactly identical to the other side, then adding the second layer of the lines to indicate the depth, the thickness of that material, and hatching of course. Now I'm going to add the detail on that window framing, the glass of that windows opening behind that wall opening. This one not necessary in too much measurement or certain technique, just using the roughly just a reference of what is there rather than just an open blank opening. And of course adding more hatching on that building facade, on the rustication wall. In this hatching process I use the vertical lines and cross to double it, to make it much thicker. Of course I started with the vertical hatch line first, and if I need it to be much thicker, I then add cross into it. That will be the stairs to get inside the opening. And when it comes to hatching sketch drawings, to me it is important to do it, repeat it again over and over with simple fine line. I do not like to press my pen too hard, because again, as I said before, it may distort the drawings because such a small drawing. I'd rather repeat it twice, 3 times, or as much as I like if I need to. Like that. So the deck, so that detail of that windows, the slightly overhang of that frame, the bottom of the window. So that more to indicate the thickness of that rustication. So this is the traditional building, symmetrical 3 opening with odd numbers of the windows opening. It looks equally in perspective drawing. Add more detail, darker on that side to differentiate between the rustication and the brick wall on that side. And again on the other side. So here it is, my classical building with symmetrical facade with odd opening, 3 opening windows. Thank you very much for watching. Do click the subscribe button. Thank you.